Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to this research writing and academic writing workshop. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Prof Penelope Engel-Hills. I hope everyone online can hear us. If we can get some indication thereof, it would be great. But welcome everyone. Thank you to those that are here in person as well. We'd love to get to know you better today. So Prof Penelope Engel-Hills is a familiar name at Regent already. She's done lots with us as far. But as you would have seen on the invitation, she's a retired dean at CPUC, Faculty of Health and Wellness. She's currently an adjunct professor there as well, and she's got a NRF rating, very high rating, and she loves supervising and teaching students. They've graduated many, and many more to come on. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Prof Penelope, and she's going to take us through this morning plan and what we're going to be doing this morning. So welcome everyone. It is a workshop session, so please engage with us as we go. If there's anything for the people online, please just post it in the chat or use the reaction tools to raise your hand if you need to stop us at any time. And yeah, we'll take a break about halfway. Thank you so much, Prof.
Good morning, everybody from my side as well, and welcome. I'm very happy to have a few faces in front of me, so thank you for attending in person, and also very happy to have all of those of you that are online. We're just busy getting the slide up and running. We can just go to those. So I have a number of slides, but I'm hoping not that it's not just going to be death by PowerPoint, because it really does need to be a workshop. I also have some exercises along the way, and we'll get through those. So that I hope, is that the mic? So maybe I have to stand behind the mic. Maybe that's a good idea. Then everybody can hear. So what I'm hoping to do today is give you a taste of some of the aspects that I would cover in a writing retreat, actually. So we would do 2 days if it's a short retreat, 3 days if it's longer, and do a lot of writing in that time and some input along the way. So I hope it covers some of the points. It's just from experience of years of supervising, seeing the sorts of things that students struggle with. But you may have particular questions, and I'm really happy to engage with those. If you've had feedback from a reviewer, for instance, and you want to ask about it, if you're struggling with a particular thing in writing, please go ahead and ask, and we'll try and get some wisdom of all of us. I am focusing on proposal writing. Let me say up front that that writing in different formats has similar principles. So a lot of what I say, if you're way past the proposal stage and you're busy writing up your thesis, a lot of it will still hold. And I'll try and sort of pick those out. But for those of you that were actually on your proposal, that's sort of the entry point of academic writing for most of us. And so it's often the most challenging. So I will focus on proposal, but it's not exclusive by any means. I'm not going to go around and ask you to all introduce yourselves, because I think we have a lot of people online, and we might then go over the time. But let me just say a little bit more about myself. So Navisha, Dr. Parag has introduced me. I think the only other thing that I would say is that academic writing is a real interest of mine. And so along the way, I will show you one paper that we've written this year, and I have others. I'm really interested in helping academics, scholars, students to write. I write in my mother tongue, and it's a big advantage. And most of my students are writing in their second or third language. And I'm just amazed, actually. I'm in awe at how well they do because I couldn't write in another language. So, but then we do need some help along the way, often for language. And then we also, all of us need help along the way, just for some of those principles, those structures. And I was really helped a lot. And so I want to also give back something to those. So what am I going to cover? Because academic writing is not like any other writing. I mean, it isn't. It has different rules and things. I'm going to try and cover a real cook's tour of it. So the writing process I'll start with, and drawing from University of Kansas, they have quite a nice writing process. The structure of a research proposal, because that's important. Some writing hints and a few exercises. Talk about flow. It's my hobby, is flow. And if I read proposals, I think that's the single biggest problem, is that there are lots of little statements and they don't hang together. And that's just impossible as for the reader. And ultimately it becomes impossible for you as the researcher, because you can't actually then use that proposal to guide you, because it's all sort of bits and pieces. And then the reviewing, revising, and editing a little bit on your voice, because that's something that we all hear about. Your voice must come out. And how on earth do I do that? And it's really not rocket science. You can easily do it. And then another favorite issue is vision, and it goes with so let's start with this is quite a nice, just diagrammatic representation. Of course, it looks quite linear. Writing is often messier than this. So don't worry about that. We try and do it. But it's important to see the steps. It's really important to understand, and this is a point that we all miss, is that there's a pre-writing phase. Before you write your proposal, you will have done a whole lot of reading. But when you read, you need to read with intent, and you need to make notes and jot things down, so that you can draw on that pre-writing. Thinking is writing. Reading is writing. It's a way of doing it. So you become in that pre-writing phase, you get ready. The researching is kind of part of pre-writing, but it's a little bit more intent on your actual study. At that stage, you perhaps you don't actually researching when you're not exactly clear on what you're going to be doing for your proposal. You have to read a whole lot more and do a whole lot more researching. In this writing process, I have put in organizing structure. And I'm going to do a little bit on organizing structure, because I think it's really helpful, especially for new writers, that you have an organizing structure. So we'll talk to that a little bit. Then drafting. And don't be scared of writing and making mistakes, and having a draft is great. It's down there. It's a start. And then you can work with it. So drafting is really important. And then you revise content, and you go back to drafting, and you maybe revise organization, because you want to shuffle things around. And sometimes you want to put one chapter in a thesis before the other, or then I put in critical friend or critical reader somewhere along the line. Often that person might do a bit of editing, but then you need an editor as well. And the final thing is proofreading. If you're lucky, while you're doing this kind of drafting, revising process, your supervisor might do quite a lot of editing and proofreading, and then you don't go that route. But I mean, I do a lot of editing and proofreading for my students along the way, but I'm reading actually for content largely for them. That's the most help I can give them. And so if I get sidetracked onto editing and proofreading, then I actually don't do the best work in terms of advising them on the substantial part of it. So in a proposal, I would not expect my students to send it out for editing and proofreading. I'm more than happy that we can do that amongst ourselves. For a thesis, even though I do quite a lot for them, I'd like them to get it edited and then, of course, you submit. So that's your writing process. And I think it's quite a helpful sort of way to start. So let's start with thinking about structure. The structure is, you see, I'm in health sciences. You know, I like structure as a skeleton. Of course, engineers would probably like structure as the design, which is also fine. The architect might like it as the plan. So any of those analogies would work. And so it's that skeleton of before you start, just the headings, just put them there, and little bits under each heading. That's your structure. And I really encourage it, especially if you get stuck, because you can go back to structure. And with structure, remember that you'll get some guidance from Regent. There'll be some sorts of templates, there'll be some sorts of guiding documents, and those things all help you with structure. And then read other people's proposals, read other people's theses. Read them, because that also helps, even if it's in a topic that's not familiar to you, it helps you with structure. And it took me a while to really latch onto how important structure is. I thought I could just kind of start with my introduction and it would just kind of happen along the way. And now, even when I write a paper, I put in a skeleton of the paper, and then I fill it. And what it does is it gets a better logic in the end. And I don't end up saying the same thing, which I'm very capable of, in 5 different places, and repeating myself. And because I have structure, and so that I think about, oh, that sounds like it belongs in that. That's fine, you know, goes in there. So if you've got a structure, it really allows you to do it. It doesn't stop your uniqueness. It doesn't lock you into it. Don't feel that you're constrained by it. It's actually there to facilitate that you can do what you want with it. So what is this kind of macro structure? Those big things. You think of a proposal. Well, first of all, tell us something about the context. You'll see later on that I like this sort of funnel system. And so I tend to start at the big picture. Some people start at the small and build out. But let's live with that. I think context is important. So tell us something about the context. Think about the audience. That's your macro structure. So with a proposal, who are you writing your proposal for? Who do you think you're writing it for? Who's your audience? Academics might well. Yeah, absolutely. Any others?
Certain departments.
Certain departments. You might have a committee in a department that reviews your proposals. Absolutely. You might have an institutional committee, and it will be other academics. Absolutely. So that's a good sort of thing to hold as the audience. And then you hold, it can be academics. Remember, though, you sit on those committees if you're lucky, if it's in your department, because they understand what you're writing. But many of our committees are multidisciplinary. And you could very well have your proposal reviewed by somebody who doesn't understand your discipline. But your proposal must stand on it by itself. It has to. I have to be able to read a student in engineering's proposal. I have to be able to, and understand what they're going to get. might have to look up some words, and I might have to kind of read one of their articles to get a little bit of insight, essentially. So that's your audience. So there you go. When you come to a thesis, your audience is who?
I don't know, but I'll speak for myself.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't apply to others as well. But for me, it's policymakers who may pick up something from them.
So if you're writing kind of in the policy area, yes, absolutely, the policymakers made very well. So a thesis is more difficult. I think the audience in your proposal is quite straightforward, and that's why you can sort of follow a bit of a recipe, and you can get it through your supervisor off to the higher degrees committee or the academic committee or wherever it's got to go. It also has to go to the research committee, and they definitely aren't going to understand all of the disciplines. So, but they're going to look for certain things. So you have to speak to them as well. It's quite straightforward. I agree with the thesis. You might be writing to the policy for the policymakers, but you're also writing for the examiners. You have to assume that examiners are knowledgeable about your field, at least to a certain extent. A lot of us work in transdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, so it's a little bit difficult to appoint examiners that would know the whole environment, but you're writing for examiners, and that's quite sort of scary, actually, and quite particular. So we need a little bit of help. And then the purpose. Tell us very clearly what the purpose of your research is. If that's missing from a proposal, then it's a big gap in your proposal. And many, I don't mind if it's not a heading purpose. I mean, I'm quite flexible about things, but quite early on, I want to know what the purpose is. You know, in the first paragraph, I want to know what this is all about and why it's happening, certainly in the first section. And so you can put it in the background, you can put it in the introduction, have a heading, but that purpose. And with that purpose, you also showcase that you're actually able to do this research. You're competent, you're kind of confident, and this is your purpose. And then you go on later in the literature review and you defend your purpose and all of those sorts of things. And you get down to your research questions. That purpose is really important. So that's the kind of macro structure. There's another way of looking at it. And some people call this macro structure the culture. I think culture, for me, is quite a difficult word, and we use it in quite complicated ways. But still, there's a culture of writing. There's no doubt. Academic writing is a culture. And so what you essentially have is you have the writer, you have the audience, and you have the subject that you're writing about. And if you put those into a Venn diagram with the context kind of behind, or actually overlaying all of them in a sense, we said you must write about the context. So who's discussing this? Where and when? This issue. So you go on to context. You're interested in a certain piece of research. Who else in the world is talking about this? Then you look at the writer. The writer connects to the subject. And you tell us why you're writing. So we don't only want to know what the subject is about, but we want to know why you've chosen to write about the subject. Why is it important? And those questions, the whats and the whys, show your scholarship. And many students tell me the what they're going to do, but there's no why. And so that it doesn't show insight, and it doesn't show that depth of knowledge if the why isn't there. So that's quite important. The writer connects with the audience through that purpose, because you actually tell the audience in your proposal what you're seeking. from them as the audience, and what you're seeking from the research, and how you think it's going to sort of be of value. That's all that you're doing with the audience. And then the audience and the subject connect through the genre. In other words, how do you present the subject? A proposal is a genre, a thesis is a genre, an academic article is a genre. So those are the sorts of things that happen. I think a pictorial image of a structure is quite well done by tall trees in a forest, because structure must have very definite parts to it, and they're quite sort of rigid, but it has lots of air gaps and sunshine and leaves, and actually even these rather solid looking stems or look, they can also change, and you can cut one out and you can do things with it. So think of that picture, think of what is it. And so in your proposal, you essentially need 3 things. In any proposal, I want to see 3 things. You can put other headings, you can put lots of headings, but I want to see an introduction. Okay? And that would include ultimately your research question and the problem. I want to see a good literature review. It's not at the stage systematic or comprehensive, and never get done that. But it's really not, that's not the intention. This is a literature review to support your proposal. It's not the literature review that will support your thesis, because that's bigger. That's going to grow as you do your research. So don't get too intimidated by the fact, but you have to do a lot of reading in order to write your proposal, to find what you want to research about. And that's what you do. I put in a YouTube, which I'm not going to show us today because it's 12 minutes, and I really want to kind of focus on the issues of writing. But I've left it there because that's one of the nicest videos that I've seen explaining what a literature review is and how to put it together. And so it's something that you can sort of. And then I want to see it go. This is where your proposal happens to be. This is what, so writing your proposal is so important to the methodology part of it. And you would have there, you might have your instruments, might have informed consent letters, but you would certainly have your paradigm that you're working in, the type of data that you're going to collect, all of those sort of things. Again, not all the detail, that can also come later. This is so that when you go out to do the research, you can actually follow your proposal. And your proposal is there to help. I mean, how many participants was that? Is this enough? I've got enough responses. Now, that's your proposal. It should be there. It's not, then your proposal wasn't complete enough. And then we can solve that. That's the sort of things that you want. So this is really, really important. So, yeah, please go ahead.
There's a hand up online.
Thank you. Yes, let's have a question.
Polosho, you have your hand up.
Are you there? Would you like to come in and ask a question? Okay, thank you. Please don't hesitate, and Dr. Parag will tabs on the chat or on hands up, and really would like for some of you to engage. So please do that. This table gives a little bit more information because I'm saying these are the 3 components of a proposal that I want to see, and this breaks it down again. So that you're really clear, what are you writing about? Well, in the introduction, first of all, you describe the real world problem. And I'll talk about worlds a little bit as we go along. But that's where most of our problems come from, of the world. Most of us aren't working in the kind of health management side of things, in health sciences side of things. We're not working in that basic science research, most of us. So the laboratories kind of work, and that's there. But a lot of us draw our problems from the real world. So then you provide background information and a rationale, and you state the research problem. So that's all part of the introduction. And the sort of questions you can ask yourself: what is the issue? What is history, context? What the background is? What happened before me? Why is it significant? And remember that we're all just focusing on a little part. And that's the other thing that researchers learn to be quite humble, because when we go in, and I still see some first draft proposals, and we solve this whole problem. And actually, the student's going to be there for the rest of their life, solving that problem. And so then we have to say, which little piece of this are you going to do for your end? And then there's life after the end. And we can keep going. So what is your focus? The literature review, and I don't need to go through all of this, you will have access to the slides. But you know, it's really important that you orient the reader to the field, tell them what the field's about, that you look at debates in the field. Don't simply look for literature that defends what you want to do or what you think. Also read literature that's contrary, and some of the debates. Because if there's debates, then it's a really great place to research. If there is that gap. And I'm kind of hesitant to use that word, but we all use that word gap. Somehow a gap makes you think that there's this gaping hole and there's this big crevice, you know, and you're going to fill it with your research. And actually, in research, our gap is a little crack. A little crack. And if we're lucky, you might be able to make that crack a little bit smaller. So that's where the debates. And then all of these things, you know, your definitions or state the art on the topic, indicate the gaps, and have your conceptual framework and your theoretical framework. If you work with conceptual frameworks and theoretical frameworks, you will listen. Some do, some don't. And I'm happy with either. I do a lot of higher education research, and you can't do education research without frameworks. Right? Please go ahead.
There's two hands up online.
Yes.
So Mohammed, you can go ahead.
Mohammed, can you hear us? Please go ahead. We on.
Walid is the other one.
Walid, go ahead. I heard somebody sort of come in and then stopped. So I'm not sure if you're unmuting or.
All right, can you hear me now, Doc?
Ah, can hear you. Thank you. We've got the IT expert sorting out life on this side, so please go ahead.
All right, thank you. So quick question. Earlier you mentioned the skeleton and the structure and framework. Is it possible to use this current structure that you've got on this slide right now as a skeleton to ask relevant questions, or rather to state topics? Because earlier you said it is great, it's a great idea to have all these little subtopics and start filling in. So in the proposal, would you mind, or would it be a good idea to have this in example under, call it literature review, talk around the position or the field, what's it about, what's the debates or definitions? Would you mind these subtopics within topics, or do you stay away from that and only use this as a guide?
I think a little bit of both. I actually, when you start, these may well be very good subheadings. What you don't want is for your proposal to be too fragmented. So where you find a section and you've got one sentence under it, then you realize that it's a bit small at that stage, and you might rather combine that. But yes, I think this would actually be a perfectly good place to start as a framework. Absolutely. Yeah. You're starting out a proposal, and you take this, but you wouldn't have the why and what questions in the third column as headings, but they would help you to know what information you're putting under. But if you had introduction and these as sort of subheadings, an introduction usually doesn't have subheadings, then what happens is each becomes a paragraph.
Sure.
But start with the subheadings. The literature review often is guided by subheadings, and these, you might put these there. Absolutely. Yes, you can do that.
All right, great. Thank you.
We have one more hand from Wally. Wally, you can unmute on your side.
Are you there, Wally? We have now set it up that you can unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, awesome. So you mentioned the word gap earlier. But instead of using the word gap, maybe we can use the word opportunity, especially the audience, like the companies that would have a vested interest in the review or the thesis.
I think that's certainly you could. The thing with the proposal, and when you read your literature and you read widely, you are wanting to find out what is that little space that you're interested in researching that is going to advance knowledge. And I think opportunity is a good word. I think it is. Later on, it almost would take on a different form, as you say. I think in the thesis, it might well take on a very different form, that notion of opportunity. Because now you've done your research, and now there might be a real sort of business opportunity or management opportunity or change opportunity. So it's a nice word, yes. I would certainly go with that. And don't hesitate to use the word gap. In literature, it's a word that's common now. These things change, but at the moment it's perfectly acceptable. I just want you to not think of that notion of solving everything with one piece of research. Right. So we have then the methodology, and that is perhaps more easily what you're doing. And of course, you would always have some appendices, because you would put in some of your instruments and some of your importance. Okay, now it's not changing slides.
Maybe the battery will try now.
Okay, I'll just change it on here for now, because I know I can.
That's my side.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Here's the control.
Oh, there.
Sorry.
Hey, you see, there's too many.
I think just for the participants, we'll take some of the questions in the Q&A just before the break. Unless there's any burning questions, we can take them if you raise your hand.
And it's not working on here either, so something's jammed. So folks, we're just looking at trying to advance the slides for now. So we'll get it sorted. There we go. Have a bit of a breather. Okay, great. I said I liked funnels, and so we're going to go. I've got 2 slides of books. Right, there we go. So two sort of slides of funnels. And I think funnels help me to write, because they help you to see that I've got to start at that broad, big level, and then I've got to come down in the funnel and end up where I am going to be, which is the research I'm doing. As I say, some people do the other way, the pyramid, and they start with small and build out. The logic of starting with a funnel is that you start big, and when you end where your research is, it naturally leads you into the next section. So it's quite a natural progression, and it helps your flow. So what do? It's just another way of looking at it. So again, you've got some sort of structure here. You identify that big picture, the broad research topic. Then you specify any subtopics that's sort of narrowing. So now you're narrowing the focus. You're interested in perhaps some sort of hospital management situation in South Africa, and you're looking at that. But now you can't research that. So then you sort of go down, and what's your subtopic? Well, it's going to maybe be within a clinic in a particular region. Then you decide what the nature of your inquiry is. All of those who, what, why, hows, and the purpose of your study. And then you specify the research objectives, or objective in a single sentence if you can, but many people have them as bullets and objectives, that's also fine, and your particular research question. I, interestingly enough, mostly now have my research question first and my objectives come next, but don't get too worried, this is perfectly good. So here's the next structure. This is the funnel of the literature review, which is your next section. And what you do is you have that kind of distantly related work is the top of the funnel. You're working in healthcare in South Africa. You know, there's background, and you talk about the disease burden, and you talk about maybe the sort of funding and how much we spend, and GDP on health, and all of those kind of big conversations there. Then you get closer to what the particular thing that you're going to do. And you narrow it down, and then you get to reading. This is a literature review, and so this is literature in that big topic, literature in the narrower topic, and literature now that's pertinent to your work. So those that you can really draw on, and particularly if you can find a few papers that really defend your proposal. Other researchers that have done something similar, but they haven't done everything, and you can do that little bit extra. So that again works quite nicely. I'll keep going. Imagine you'll. No, I can't move my slides again. This is not working. Oh, okay, there we go. So I said I would talk about worlds. Now this is a writing workshop, and I don't want to veer too far into research methodology and methods. But there's always a bit of a kind of a place where they merge. And I do think that this three-world framework, John Tom's, it's an old book, but he introduced this kind of three-world framework. And I think it helps us to write sometimes if we can locate our work. And so world one is where we live. It's our everyday life. But this doesn't mean that it's your home environment. This is your everyday life as a professional or as a scholar, or sort of world that you're going to research in. So I'm in a university, and in a hospital, and those are my world one environments. And that's actually where we get our problems from. That's where we draw our research problems from, is this everyday life. Then through the research process, we take these problems that we've identified and we take them into world two. And world two is the world of science. World two is research that's happening all over the place. It's that body of knowledge. It's everything that's in every journal. It's everything that's in every book. So there's your world two. So all those theories and concepts and models and instruments, as well as your findings and your data and your findings, all of that sits in world two. And most of us operate between world one and world two. We find a problem here and we research it there. Okay? And that's kind of, so the research process happens here. World three is the world of meta science. So that's your paradigms and your philosophies and research methodologies. Are you going to be quantitative or qualitative? Those are sit up in world three. And so we don't tend to operate there, but we pull from there down so that we can work here. So we understand the paradigm, or we draw on research methodologies and we pull them together. A few people researching that. They create theories, and you might do some model development, but mostly the sort of models that we do are quite practical, and so we're still operating in world two. But if you're into that highly theoretical part of research, you may well operate there. As I say, most of us, we draw from this into world two, and we find our problems in world one, and then turn it into science in world two. So I think that just kind of, for me, at least frames what we're doing. If you use a theoretical framework, so your theoretical frameworks are kind of sitting up in really in kind of world three. If you use theoretical frameworks, you can use them to bounce into your methodology. Because these theoretical frameworks are essentially associated with those world three philosophies, with worldviews. I mean, what sort of worldview do you take? Ecocentric worldview, and morphic worldview. What sort of worldview do you have? And that's all sitting up there in a highly theoretical worldview. And you figure these out because you need alignment. So here's the next big word that I'll pass on. I'll ask for alignment. We'll sort of talk about the golden thread. And I think it's that you have a problem, you talk about it, and you're doing great, and then you do a methodology. And I think, I was going to answer that. What's happened there?
While talking about the worldviews, I'm just thinking about democracy as well as a concept of socialism, for example. Would those fit in as the worldviews?
Yeah, they socio-political views, of course, and what happens with worldviews is that you can have a worldview which is based on a morality, which is the same as mine, but we might have different socio-political perspectives. So they do overlap, but absolutely, your worldview is part of who you are. And so if it's about, especially if it works and it aligns with the sort of study that you're doing, you're maybe promoting a particular approach or a solution, and it fits in with sort of a political positioning, absolutely. That would fit with the worldview. Yes,
because I'm asking this having in mind what is happening around the world in terms of these BRICS nations versus what we've been used to for so long.
We can be BRICS, but very soon.
Yeah, so in a way, it looks like these are the territory now is contested at the highest level.
And you know, I'd sort of veer away from labeling it your worldview, because then you might get pinned into a hole. But I'm encouraging you to understand yourself and to put yourself into it and to bring some of that in. And so all of those things that you say, bring it in, but don't necessarily label it your world. Yeah. Great. And let's have that. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Ruben.
Yes, thanks. Am I audible enough?
Yes, you are.
Okay, Prof, I've got a couple of questions. The first question is like, at what point do you incorporate your global perspective in the in your proposal and also the thesis at large?
I would put it quite early on in the introduction.
In the introduction.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I think that's that top of the funnel, and that's the whole context, that big macro context. The top of the funnel, I think that's a good place to put it. You know, some people like the research question first and a little bit of a paragraph on that, and you must please work with your supervisors. I mean, I don't give you sort of broad principles, but ultimately you do your proposal and your supervisors. And I know some supervisors like that kind of purpose and upfront. And then immediately after that, if you're doing that, you put that big context reason. And for me, I would actually start with that. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm looking at the based on the regions, call it like template for the DBAs. There's introduction, then there's background. So you mentioned the introduction, and then there's also background. It looks like you've combined the introduction and the background. So now I'm a little bit confused.
Okay. So if your template separates introduction and background, I must get hold of that template. Then your introduction is your introduction to the study and to the proposal. Okay? And then your background is that first big question. Yeah. So that's what you do. So then you start with your introduction and you introduce your study, and you introduce the even that might have a research question, definitely would have your purpose. And you might even talk to the proposal, you know, some sort of to lead the reader in, and then you go into your background, and your background is that. Yeah. Does that help?
So in this case, I have to incorporate my global view in the background.
In the background. I wouldn't put it then in the introduction. When I said in the introduction, then I would think that would be a kind of an introduction which incorporates background into it. It's very nice to separate them. It actually makes good logic. And then I would put it in background. Because the context is actually your background.
Okay, 100%. And then my second and last question is due to the POPI, like, you know, the POPI Act and all this legislation, are we allowed to call it, let's say, name the actual organization under study in my topic? Let's say I'm looking at, call it like your SASO, for instance. Can I name that specifically in my study? Can I also be mentioning it in my like your in the proposal as is, or I'll just have to be I'll just have to keep the name a bit anonymous?
So here I'm going to give you an answer with two parts to it. The first thing is that a proposal has a limited audience. And we expect that audience to honor confidentiality. We do not expect a research proposal to be published. So because the reviewers and you know who are reviewing it at the institutions, so at Regent in this case, They want to know what your research site is. So that's number one. So it's fine for the proposal. I would not, though, put it in the title. Because if you put it in the title, it might carry into your thesis, and then you might move on. So what you want is you actually, in the title, I would just say at, whatever petrochemical company in South Africa, and leave it at that. And then in the detail, when you talk about the research site, yes, in your proposal, mention it. If you're going to name it in the thesis, it will be entirely dependent on the informed consent that you have. You would have to you would actually get specifically consent to name the organization. And that particular consent. It's not informed consent to interview the AD or the employees. It's you have that as well, but you also then have to have a consent to name the organization specifically if you're going to name it. But that's later down in the pieces. So I hope that's helpful for you.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, if I get consent from the organization, like in the organization that I'll be studying, I can name it in my topic. Let's just say I'll say looking at competitive factors for SASO, for instance. Can I specifically do that, or I can only name an industry? Why I'm asking is because obviously if I have to name a sector, then that means I'm going to need consent from different organizations.
No, from a company, or even the heading would be very clear that it's a single company, just not naming it. But sure, if they give you permission to name them, then yes, absolutely you can name them.
Okay.
But please don't name them without that permission.
All right.
That's all. And that's you're quite right with the POPIA Act, because remember that the POPIA Act is for persons, human persons, but also for juristic persons. And so all of that means that all of your organizations and entities are also covered under POPIA as juristic persons.
Correct.
So I have research participants now, for instance, because I've been working in a community for many years, and some of them want to be named. They don't want to be anonymous. And so long as I get the proper consent and they sign, then Sophia in Ocean View gets named in my papers now, because that's her choice. She didn't want to be anonymous. She said, I'm not doing this to be anonymous. I'm doing it to put Ocean View on the map. And so I want to see myself in the papers, and I want to see my community in the papers. And so that's it. So you can do the same with your SASOL, but please then you must have permission. Yeah. And so, thank you. So here we, whoops. Here I've said that quite often a research methodology book can help you with that part of your proposal. But please don't stay with textbooks. In a proposal, what we want to see is other researchers that have done a similar study to you that you're drawing from. So we must see research literature, not just textbooks. And of course, I'll also mention later that we don't need you to write a textbook. So we don't need you to tell us everything about the methodology, just what's relevant for your proposal. And that's a mistake that many people make, even in a thesis. I did a thesis of kind of 400 pages, and 200 pages is theory on what other people have told about the method and about this. And that can all come out. I don't need that. I can just go and read a textbook. Little bit, it's that fine balance, but not too much. And don't tell me all the methods that don't relate to your study. And pull out a little bit. and then equalize. So, but also don't worry too much. The thing about being on an MBA or a DBA program is we acknowledge that you're novice researchers. And that's why you're here, is because we're teaching you to be researchers. And so don't, these things come from years of kind of lessons and things. So it's all good. And you will find that most examiners are quite generous in terms of how they look at student research, because you've got to make real mistakes to not pass. I mean, really, it happens honestly there. If you settle down and you do the best you can, and you've got a supervisor who guides you, you will have to do corrections. I don't think I've ever had a thesis which doesn't have some corrections. But that's good. That's fine. It strengthens. You can be pretty sure that you're going to pass. And you're confident about that, just do the work. So don't let me put you off, right? Okay. So now, I want you to just spend kind of 5 minutes and write down what area are you researching in? And that's that big context, that big area. What area are you researching? Then what's the topic of your study? And it doesn't matter where you are in your research. Try and do this, because it'll help us to see that you've actually understanding where you are. And what is your research question? If you prefer to give me a research objective, I have no problem. And that's essentially going to become the focus. So just take a few minutes, think about that. Question, but we'll go with it. I think we have to help with this. Sure. Right, maybe somebody would be brave enough to give us an answer. Tell us what they, and anybody from online wants to please just go ahead, and hopefully one from the audience here as well. Yes, please go ahead, Rob.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about my current study. So the area of research is safety content communications.
Okay, great.
The topic of my study is identifying mechanisms associated with mismatch of resistance in fact moments that matters, and investigating where there are patterns. And my research question is, how is technique today in ion metabolism, fact moments that matters biases, and the development of mathematical design? And in contact nanoparticles so that potential particles that we can often contact in mathematical design.
So really nice. I mean, you've got that big area working in STIs and sexually transmitted diseases, huge topic. You could take any possible avenue, but you honed it down with a really nice topic of your sort of biochemistry type study, and you've got a very focused for those of you that don't understand all of it, and I don't either. You can hear that he understands exactly what he's doing. It's very clear what the focus is. It's very clear what the questions are, and we all know now that it's going to move knowledge forward, and we're going to find out some information to feed back into this big area, because that's in the thesis. You do it in reverse. You go from here and you feed it back, and you say, I've contributed knowledge to the challenging problem of STIs in the country. Thank you. Is there anybody online who had a hand up? Reason, please go ahead.
Yes. So my area is actually on. Am I audible? Sorry. Okay.
Yes,
so my area is retail. So my topic is to examine factors for competitiveness in order to develop an implementation framework to enhance business performance. A case of the fresh produce retail sector in South Africa. So my research topic is my research questions is obviously what are my main research questions, is what are the key factors for competitiveness that enhance business performance for the fresh produce sector in South Africa? So I would say this is mostly based on strategic management or marketing. So that's my main focus. So my main focus is to obviously to look at competitive factors or determinants of competition in order to implement in order to develop an implementation framework for policy or strategy makers.
Excellent. So again, big topic of retail, and it could be retail in anything, but as you went down the funnel and you told us, we could gather now it's retail in fresh produce, so that's quite a nice focus. And then it's not just retail in fresh produce, but it's also looking at the competition, and it's looking at some sort of management issues in implementation of what some of your findings and what you will recommend. So again, a really nice, we talk about it confidently. If you can talk about it confidently, both that volunteered, so thank you, were able to, and that's part of your voice, that will come out again. But when you say that you have your own voice, part of having your own voice is that you can talk about your study like this, through these kind of things.
So,
yes, please go ahead.
Good question. Just going back to the reasons topic.
Yeah.
It seems rather broad to use the words of active.
and retail in South Africa, fresh produce and extreme news. There's not like an overreach on the topic of should we begin to start thinking about okay, let's narrow it down to kind of what we came there and whatever. I mean,
yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think that's really important, and I presume the reason that you aren't going to go to 1,000 sites in South Africa. You're going to have a bit of a focus somewhere.
So initially, the thing is like, actually, that's why I actually asked the question. So what happened is like, when I narrowed it down to a certain organization, obviously within the fresh produce sector. But when I got the comments from my doc, she told me that for a DBA, you cannot focus on one organization. You can only look at you can look at like at the sector or like more than one organization, because you need to obviously gather as much information as possible. So hence I had to broaden it to like a sector.
And so I mean, I'm definitely not getting into the space of coming between supervisor and student, because that wouldn't be helpful to you or to the supervisor. And I think I get that you need for a D to have a substantial proposal, a substantial research, and that's what she was encouraging. But of course, it's still within a sector and possibly within a region. And so not a single supplier or retailer, but a kind of a little bit of a selection of various retailers within a region. Great. Thank you for that explanation.
All right, thanks.
We have to get rid of that before I can move on. Oh, okay. Oh, right. And Kusanati, please go ahead.
Thank you, Doc. Good morning, and good morning to the other attendees. My area is the 4th IR. My topic is the 4th IR as an economic development catalyst. And my research questions are, what is the current state of the ICT sector in SA? What are the potential economic benefits of capitalizing on the 4th IR? What technologies are companies in this space already using? The challenges associated with implementing some of the newer technologies, policies government can put in place, potential risks and negative impacts, and how the government and the private sector can work together to leverage some of these technologies. So one will look at your drone technologies, cybersecurity, IoT, big data within the telecoms and media and ICT space amongst SMMEs and large employers. And the approach is going to be mixed methods. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. So you also have a big study, but you do have focus. You've got a clear idea of where you're headed. And it's very relevant to the times. And that's another thing. I mean, we want relevant research. Ideally in South Africa, we're really driving the agenda of socially relevant research. And of course, 4IR is relevant. It's upon us. It's hit us all, and it's happening. So I like your idea also of you're taking some smaller and some bigger, and you're kind of going to look at how the impact is. And you'll, for yourself, as you prepare that, know how many sites you need and so on. Now, there were a couple of other questions which I should perhaps just quickly address. And the one was around sample size. And somebody asked a question on sample size, but I don't know what the study is. So if you can, do we have a name there? Singer, you asked a question on sample size. It's not really a part of a writing workshop, but I think it's very important that we use every opportunity to support our students And so, I mean, methodology and writing go together when it's a proposal. So, explain to me your study and what then I'll maybe be able to help you with the sample size. Are you there, Cinder?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes, okay. I'm in the enterprise development space. So basically, I assist SMMEs in terms of business development services. So my research topic is basically on the challenges that SMMEs face when trying to, access financing. So basically, yes, it was regarding how do you determine your sample size, because we've got such a large pool of SMMEs that we assist, over 200. And then how do I narrow it down to a sample which, and what would be a good sample size? Because initially I thought maybe 40, but then at the same time I thought maybe it's too little. And yeah, I wasn't too sure as how to go about it.
What is your data collection tool?
Sorry?
How are you going to collect your data?
Basically, I'm gonna just look at not all SMMEs do want financing or have applied for financing. So basically, I was just going to use maybe a random, what you would call it, but random selection of the ones that want financing but have had challenges in accessing that financing.
That's great, that we're getting there. But now, how are you going to collect your data? Are you going to interview people? Are you going to go to an observer?
Oh, okay.
Are you going to go and get documents? Yeah.
It's a mixture of an interview and a questionnaire.
Okay. So if you're doing mixed methods, and I see that a number of you like mixed methods, and it's fine, but mixed methods must tie together to be mixed methods. So you must decide what you're going to do first to feed into the next step. So I would suggest that if you're going to do some sort of questionnaire and you've got 200 SMEs and maybe 180 of those have sought finance, which is your kind of criteria, I would send it to all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
You should do a statistical analysis to see what return would give you a good statistical power. and that's a relatively easy thing to do, but I'm sure you also have access to stats help too. So it's but it's not a difficult calculation to do, because you know what the total number is. You would know what sort of what reliability or you want and what validity you want. You kind of have a sense of that. And then you could calculate it. And then if you do that first, and then from that, then purposely, I presume, will sample some of them for interview to follow up. With that, is that a fair kind of assumption?
Yes, because we do engage with I do engage with them on a regular basis. So the questionnaire, because I also didn't want to make it too long, because I know with entrepreneurs their time is very limited. That's why it was a mixture, because with some of the question it needs to be in depth. I can't just ask a 5-Likert scale type of a question, because I need to really drill down as to what is the real challenge behind them not being able to access the financing.
So then your question is, what is a fair sample for a purpose of sample to get to? And
yes,
I would, the qualitative sampling is not as clear cut as the quantitative sampling. We can do a statistical calculation and we can defend a number for a sample. When you get to qualitative, it's much more difficult. And it's about, because it's about, you talked about it, drilling down, getting that. So we often talk there about also something which is kind of, it was a great catchword, but it's not so, it's losing popularity, but it's still very much, I think the notion of it is still correct, and that's saturation. So that you gather data until you don't get new data.
Okay.
And that's quite a typical thing in qualitative research. And you might find, because it's quite focused, it's nicely focused, the study, on the financial sort of challenges that they face. You might find that after 5 or 6 interviews, you're not getting new data. And then you can stop. You know?
Okay.
But don't put me down and say, she said I only had to do 5 or 6, because if you do your analysis along the way, and we see, if you're still getting new data, then you probably need to go on. So it depends what data. Sometimes, you know, you can interview 2 or 3 people in qualitative, it just depends. So my advice there is to find literature where somebody has done something similar. Qualitative analysis of kind of financial challenges, whatever. And it won't be exactly the same, but it'll be, and see what sample they have, and then you can also defend it through literature. Because in the qualitative vein, we tend to defend our samples through literature and through the point of saying, well, we collect data. We don't get it.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof.
Yeah, Philip, please go.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Prof. My area is finance and economic development. And the topic is assessing the feasibility and implications of transitioning to a consumer credit-based economy in Liberia. The research questions are, what are the key determinants of a successful transition to a consumer credit-based economy? 2, how does transitioning to a consumer credit-based economy impact economic growth, financial inclusion, poverty reduction, and sustainability? 3, what are the potential risks and challenges associated with transitioning to a consumer credit-based economy in Liberia? And 4, what policies and measures can be implemented to mitigate potential risks and maximize the benefits of transitioning to a consumer credit-based economy in Liberia? Now, my issue is that there are a couple of organizations in Liberia, like the Central Bank, the Liberia Revenue Authority, the World Bank Group, that are the population of the study. But what, I mean, do I need to get permission from each of those entities to go ahead with the study? But I mean, so far that's what I want to do. And it's still pending approval though, because I had to pivot from one topic to another.
I can
Thank
see you
you.
worked hard. You have a clear idea of where you're going. You've got a number of research questions, and you're also going to go to a number of organizations. So from that side, you're ready, and you're obviously already writing about it. From permission, absolutely. Can't go into an organization and collect data unless you have consent. Yeah. You do need that.
I can barely hear you. There's a lot of echo.
So what I'm saying is for informed consent and permission, you cannot go into any area and collect data unless you have permission from that organization. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So basically, maybe the Central Bank of Liberia.
you'll have to decide what organizations you're collecting data from. And yes, you would need to, as researchers, we absolutely cannot go into organizations and collect data. Now, I understand that Liberia would have different structures in terms of ethics and things, but that basic principle holds wherever you are researching in the world, and particularly because you're a student of Regent. We definitely not want you going into any area and collecting data unless you had permission to do so. Yeah.
Thank you. There's one more question from Rajani. May you please explain the difference between introduction and background?
Okay. So I talked to that a little bit, but what I'm saying is the introduction is the introduction to your study and to your proposal. That's the introduction. The background is the background to your study. And so the introduction is much more contained to, this is the purpose, this is where I'm going to do the research, these are my research questions, that sort of thing. The background is, I'm working in the area of retail, to use Reason's example. And this is the context of retail in South Africa. And the particular retail industry that I'm interested in is fresh produce, you know, and this is how fresh produce happens. That's the background. Okay? And then to every topic, note the time frame to complete research while it is in the known. So that's just a comment. And then I noticed there's one here, and I don't know if it's on yours, but can I submit my research proposal while I wait for the permission letter from organization? And I would like to answer that because I think it might be really helpful to all of you. And yes, you can definitely submit your proposal while you're writing to organizations to get their permission. You just make it clear in your proposal that this is the letter you send out to the organization and you're waiting for a response. And then you would get approval for your proposal, because then you can go on for ethics. And even ethics you can apply for without permission from the organizations, because some organizations want ethics approval before they'll give you permission. And we must, as the higher education institutions, be the ones that back down. We would love permission from the site before we give you ethics approval. But we're the ones that must step back. And what we do is we give you conditional ethics approval. And it's conditional on getting permission. But then you can go to the organization and say, my proposal has ethics approval, conditional on you giving me permission to come to it. And that's what they like. So I hope that helps you, but that's how that is. Great. I think we're going to have a break, probably.
Just maybe last one, just before the break, in Kusinati.
And Kusinati, did you have another question?
Yes, Doc. Thank you. I'll be very quick. It's two questions. The first one is, if one is the research will touch on SMMEs, would you recommend that we differentiate between SMMEs in agriculture, finance, training and development, manufacturing, and ICT? Because also their needs might be different. For instance, around agriculture, equipment might be a challenge. They might need assistance around that. And then under ICT, things like licenses, and in manufacturing, the various ISO standards, manufacturing also being capital intensive. But the common issues could be access to markets and things like online and digital marketing. And then the second question is, would a sample size of 10 to 15 participants for your semi-structured interviews suffice? And for the questionnaire, if one is targeting between 180 and 240 respondents, would that suffice, or should it generally be higher? I'm a second-year DBA student. Thank you very much.
So let me answer the second one first. You have to have a statistical analysis. I can't tell you whether 180 is enough because I don't know what the total population is. And you must always know what the total population is in order to calculate what is a statistically significant sample. So you need to do some look at and work out what is that and get some help with the stats answer for that one. In terms of sort of 10 to 12 for the semi-structured interviews, start with 10 or 12 and then see how your data collection goes and see if you're getting new information still at 8, then you keep going. And if you're still getting new information at 12 and they're completely different, then keep going. My gut feel it's probably enough. I mean, that's a gut, but I don't know. Your first question is a question of focus. And I think that that's a question that you're going to have to raise with your supervisor, because only between you and your supervisor will you know, do you have to look at sort of small and big, or can you just look at the smaller organizations? I mean, do you have a focus of finance, or do you have a focus of IT? I mean, all of those things, I'm afraid, without actually a much longer engagement with you, I'm not going to put my head on a block for those. But they're good questions. And what's really great is that you're asking those questions. Because when you're asking those questions, it means that you're thinking about it, and you will find the answers. You'll find the answers by reading. You know, I may have helped a little bit, and you'll know what answers to ask your supervisor. But I do think that you are looking quite broad still, and you probably need to focus on that.
Thank you, Doc. No, thanks.
We'll probably take a break now.
Yeah.
Maybe let's wait on one question.
Sure. So the answer is yes. So that's a similar question that was asked. You want to go to the hospital. I mean, you've got more than one thing for a hospital. If it's a private hospital, you go to the hospital. If it's a state hospital, you've also got to work through your provincial health committee. So you've got quite a few sort of approvals to get, but definitely you can submit your proposal while those other things are happening. In fact, if you go to the provincial health committee, they will want an approved proposal. They will actually want ethics before approval, before they will give you permission to go into a hospital. And then once you've got permission from, if it's a state hospital, public hospital, from then you still have to go to the hospital and get permission sort of from the individual departments. So please don't wait. Get going and submit your proposal. Absolutely.
With the facilities name.
With the facilities name on it. Yes. Thank you. With the facilities name on it. And you know, if that changed, then you can always do an amendment to your proposal. That's perfectly acceptable. You know, we might have somebody who wants to connect 3 hospitals and 2 hospitals get permission, and it isn't from the 3rd, and they go with the 2, or something happens. I mean, for some reason, something happens at that hospital, and now they can't have a researcher there, and you have to change. Those things are possible. We can do amendment, but when you submit your proposal with the facility name on it. Yeah. So shall we, I think we'll take a break. What do we, about 10 minutes? So we'll take it, for those of you that are online, 10 minutes proposal, 10 minutes break. I think I'm going to probably need to stop answering research methodology questions. So because it's not a research methodology course today, it's a writing, and I'm not going to get through any of the writing side. So I mean, I'm happy to have helped you, but from now on, if they're writing questions, I'll answer. If they research methodology questions, I'm going to say to you, good that you've written them down, good that you've documented, good that we've made you think about them, because those are the questions that you now need to go and ask your supervisors.
Thank you.
So we can have a.
So for everyone that you are doing feelings actually as well.
How are you doing?
I'm good,
Nice,
thank you.
nice to see you again. Yeah, we met very briefly yesterday.
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank
How's
you.
Cape Town?
Cape Town's actually
Beautiful.
wonderful.
Ah, you know,
I-
you plan to relocate to KZN.
Hey,
eh?
you know, I'm not, it's not bad.
Where you stay? Where you stay?
I stay in Rondebosch, so under the mountain.
Ah,
Yeah.
Right near the Baxter Theatre, that area?
So on the other side of the railway line,
Yeah.
but close
Close
to
by.
Baxter. I mean,
Oh, lovely. And
uh,
where you staying in Durban?
and I'm at Blue Waters.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
And it's a better area. At least you can see some action this morning.
Oh,
Everybody's moving
I can
around.
tell you what, you took action.
Yeah.
Last night was a party.
Yeah. No, that's
Friday
really.
It was fabulous. So I opened my doors. I'm on the 10th floor, so it was, and the revelry was going on, and youngsters in fancy gear and cars hooting and motorbikes.
Nice.
And when it got a bit noisy, I could just close.
And get you in the bed. So are you officially not retired?
I'm officially retired from management positions, so I'm not dean
So are you
anymore.
still working at
But I
CPT?
still work at CPT in an adjunct position
In healthcare?
in healthcare.
Okay.
And so I have a bit of a joint appointment. So I work in the health faculty, and then I also work with our Professional Education Research Institute.
Yeah.
So we have that. We have a chair there in the world, and I help her do research there. And then I also work. We have an oxidative stress research unit, which where we do a lot of studies on rooibos. We actually also starting to research on cannabis.
Cannabis.
I mean,
yesterday, interestingly, I went to a night market. I went to a night market, you know, the usual flea market, night market food stall. Right? First time I saw this guy, you know, make those cashew nuts, you know, they coat them in that caramel. He's got a now new version with cannabis in it. And it's got like a whole range of like, I'm thinking,
so my research community is would have been an old fishing community,
right.
And of course then it got increased with forced removals and and so they also have a Rastafarian camp up on the mountain.
I saw that when I drove.
So, and I researched with them, and I have to say, it's actually it's fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous. The things that they actually make.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful cookies and chutas, but you know you can get.
And how's what's her name? Drukkie.
Yes, Drukkie.
Yeah.
Hey, swimmer.
Yeah.
Yes,
Is she still there?
She is. So she's our VC's sort of right hand.
That's what she said. She's still there. And there was another guy.
It's because of her that I was introduced here.
No, that's how I got. I was chatting to her because we met her some years back, some time back, and we wanted to do exactly this. You know, develop the whole research agenda, and then she suddenly disappeared to Botswana. And then when she came back, we said, "Hey, let's keep in touch and whatever." But it's good, man. Keeping us all young.
That's it. You know. If I don't keep doing this, then what?
Then what?
And I think that's the bad thing with academics.
Right.
My husband's an engineer, but he was in the industry all the time.
Yeah.
And so he has hobbies.
Right.
You know, my hobby this is my hobby.
But this is stimulating. I mean, it keeps you constantly thinking about it.
ecotourism experience offered by
Thank you very much. Hope you can hear me. Hope you all had a break. We had a little break here, and I'm going to keep going. And just a reminder, I do understand that we've got a lot of methodology questions, and that's something that we're going to have to talk about, because maybe there can be some sort of different engagement to help you with all of those. I'm not going to get through all my slides today, but I do want to get further than I have. Oh, why can't I? There we go. All right. So now to focus on some writing. When you're writing about your research methodology, we know what goes in it. Your design and your ethical considerations. Another nice link for ethics there that I'm not going to go to, but just so that you've got it. Some selection criteria you will do, data collection methods, and so on. A writing tip for methodology is this, and that's what I've sort of spoken to. Don't tell the research committee what a case study is. Explain why you have selected this design. Okay. And then in a way you are telling them, you are drawing from what it is, but that's what they want to see. They don't want to see a textbook expose of what it is. And then also here, with a writing tip, justify them and with reference to other studies. So when you do your data analysis methods, in fact, when you do your data collection methods, even your tools, as far as possible, try to reference other researchers. We're very scared of getting proposals where people say nothing like this has ever been done before. Then it's probably not suitable for a student postgrad study. Okay, leave that and also chances are we will find it as it's about how big of a literature it is. So the basic on that. I quite like tables, and this can help you when you sort of structure your writing. Another way, so I said the funnel and those tables that I gave you, but here's a different way. Put your research sub-questions or your objectives in the one column. Put the data source and the data needed here. So you might want some relevant documents, you might want lived experiences, you might want the computer literacy reflections, so to answer this question, that's the data sources. What are the methods? So then you're going to collect documents, you're going to do individual semi-structured interviews. And then what's the unit of analysis is good for you to think about. And it's somehow something that students struggle with, but try and think what the unit of analysis is. And then in the last column, put your data analysis. In a proposal, we want to see how you intend to analyze your data. It may change a little bit, it may extend a little bit, but we do want to see that you're not only able to collect the data, but you have an intention of how you analyze. And I just put there, for the questions that I'd asked here about SMEs, I thought that probably a theoretical analysis on digital capabilities model might be quite good. And it's a way of analyzing your data by taking an existing model out of literature. And then you can look at your data. Somebody was talking about ICT earlier, and you can sort of answer these questions and see, does your data speak to any of these or all of these? And so you applied. And this is one example, and there's just a myriad of examples. So you can really do a lot with that. So now, how do you prepare yourself to write? Let's go back to that. First of all, check your writing culture. So check, I was really pleased to hear that somebody sort of speaks to the fact that they have the templates that the business school has. That's essential. That's your starting point as students here. So, you know, the culture of the writing is Regent Business School academic writing, as well as your discipline. That's also, because if you're in health management versus doing some of the other management programs, it's different. So there is a culture to do that. Develop the textual and the detailed structure for your project. And of course, your proposal helps that, and that's why I gave you some structures. Customize your generic structural guides on the template for your study. Don't be so hand-in with the template. You kind of, it doesn't really fit what you do. The template is never there to constrain. It's there to make it work for you. So it's great, but make it work for you. Now I want to talk about some ways to help us advance writing. And to help you really get a little bit stuck. I think that's kind of important. And we have a snap writing group, so we have snap writing. The other sort of end of the spectrum is binge writing. So if you go on a writing retreat and you write for 3 days, or if you lock yourself in your room and you say, this weekend, I'm not going to do anything, I just come out for food, but I'm just going to write, that's binge writing. Snap writing is something that you do just in short sort of pieces. And I have a snap writing group. In fact, I have 2 snap writing groups, one that I attend and one that I run. And they happen every week. So on a Wednesday, between 6 and 7 in the evening, and on a Tuesday, between 7 and 8 in the morning. We do snap writing. And what does snap writing do? It's, you set writing goals. So you set yourself a goal, and that's actually really important, especially if you just don't know where to go. Set a goal. I'm going to write about my methodology. And it must be specific and measurable, and there would be some preparation necessary for it, because you might need to get some books and some articles and read them, because this is not a space where you want to go down the rabbit hole. You don't want to be on the internet. This is a space where you want to be tucking away on your, okay, or some of us even scribe in the old-fashioned. Your writing goal should be meaningful. Obviously, it's to get you towards your end point, which is your proposal. In the time of 25 minutes, we kind of say 150 to 200 words. I can tell you sometimes I only write 20 words, 40 words. But they're really great because they were on something that I just couldn't get right. And then I focus on it and I get 40 words and it's fabulous. You know? So don't think that that's essential. Then you write for 25 minutes, and we call it the Pomodoro method. Pomodoro is a tomato in Portuguese. And you sort of go for 5 minutes, you have your goal setting. We do it online. And so you could actually get groups amongst yourself. You could support each other, but you can also sit at home and do it for yourself. You set the goal, then you write for 25 minutes, first Pomodoro. Then for 5 minutes, you do a quick report back, have a break, go and get yourself a glass of water, walk around the room just to stretch. Then you do another 25 minutes, and then you do a reflection. And so in an hour, just over an hour, you've had 2 very focused 25 minutes. And we tested it out, and I decided one article I was going to write just in our weekly. And it took me 6 months to write that paper, just 2 hours snap write. But I can tell you something, I have taken sometimes years to write that. So 6 months is kind of, is not bad. I'm usually working on several papers at the same time, and I'm of course working with students on their papers and things, but I did that. So it's quite a good system. You do need to go with the writing flow always. You need to free yourself. You learn to get better at it. because I think the really important thing with writing is this idea that it doesn't have to be perfect. Just have to get it written. And then you can do something with it. As a supervisor, I can do something with it. I can't do anything until you've done something. Because I can't start for you. So I mean, you have to just start writing. And then I don't mind what a mess it is. I can tell you some of mine are a mess. And to start with. So it's really important. And I quite like this. You know, when you start, just write some letters and they make a word. Just write some words and they make a sentence. Some sentences make a page, some pages a chapter, and some chapters make a book or a proposal. It's just plod on, plod on, plod on. For Prewriting, which is a slightly different technique, Prewriting then is that you don't come with prepared, and you're not writing with a particular goal. You just sit and write. And that we just set 5 minutes for. And you don't worry about grammar and spelling. You don't stop. You just write for 5 minutes. You type 5 minutes. When I say write, I have no problem with keyboard writing. It can be for any piece of your writing, particularly if you're stuck on something and you just can't quite get that explanation. And they even say that you can kind of write the same word over and over. Eventually, something happens. So I was going to do an exercise. I think I'll leave you to do these exercises probably yourself and get through some of this in the next hour because you're going to get all of these things. So what would I suggest you do? You choose a short but meaningful writing objective, or you do a Prewriting exercise and you can just do it for 5 minutes. And then ultimately you build up, and I do think that all of you should be having 1 or 2 days where you can set aside that hour and do 2 hours, 25 minutes writing, and you will find it's amazing. The worst thing for writing a proposal, and when the piece is even worse, is when you read it for a week. It becomes a month, and then you pick it up again. It's like starting from the beginning. If you do something every day, just something, you just read something, just let them know, just go through, just read your own thesis, some of it. Keep in touch with it, keep engaged with it. Then you see yourself that avenue of you work so hard in it, you have no idea what's there, but in the impact your work, you just do for so long. And we've all been there, but I want you to avoid that. And so I think that's when you do the report back in either with the snack writing or with your Prewriting, you look at things like, did you overestimate or underestimate your writing goal? Because then the next time you can adjust it and you know that's what you're capable of. And so, yes, when we started our snack writing, we type our goals in chat with students online, and my students would sort of say, you know, I'm going to write the methodology of my chat for my thesis. And some of you can braver than that, they're going to write the article, not. Then you learn. You probably like to do the introduction to the article, or you might do a small part until you get better at setting goals. Were you able to focus? I mean, it's not easy, but you learn to focus. Is the writing flowing, or did you get stuck? And are you happy with your focus? So those are the questions to ask. And in the reflection at the end, we don't rigidly stick to this, but it's quite nice to guide. You can sort of think about what happened and how did you feel? Was it a good or bad experience? And you make some sort of sense of it, of that writing experience. Could you have done something differently, and what would you do then in the next time? And think about that. And then that's just the article that we've written this year, and we called it Writing Together Alone because we're all online, but we're writing as a group. And so, and we looked at the role of digitally connected staff writing in progressing academic writing. We're in a similar space as you. We're trying to promote research and academic writing. Staff are pushing publications, and so we're looking for innovative ways to try and help people write, and this is one thing. So as I say, I have 2 groups, and it really helps me. I know that I have 2 hours every week in which I will only focus on writing. I can't look at an email. I can't get up and do my washing. I can't, I mean, that's all I'm going to do. And that 2 hours is amazing what gets done. So I like Leonard Bernstein because when he says inspiration is wonderful, when it happens. But the writer must develop an approach for the rest of the time. So that's it. Writing's hard. It's slog work. And when there's aha moments and there's lights are on, it's fabulous. But we have to develop an approach to the rest of the time. So walking methods is another way that when we go on writing retreats, we do walking methods, and because you get a change of scenery, but it must be a thinking walk. This isn't walking to sort of chat about your children or your dogs. This is walking to chat about, to talk about your work, your research. And it does, it progresses tremendously, even during the washing up. And Christy is well known for the fact that a lot of her plots were developed while she was washing up. I don't share that sentiment whatsoever. I will avoid it if I all can. And I have a kind husband who does it mostly, so that's not my space for. But it works for some, and then getting away from the desk or the laptop, and getting a different perspective. So find ways that help you unblock. Don't just give up. Don't just say, and if you set this evening to write, and you sit down there and you just can't, you do something. Go for a walk, but think about your writing. Do a bit of a free writing exercise. Read a journal article. Do something towards your writing. Don't give up. It's really, and you will know what you do. And people have many ways of doing it. You should try and get a network of friends who are also studying. That can help sometimes. And I mean, cut the food is wonderful for writing. Some of the kind of things. Some people think in the bath and think in nature. So all of that. So now just another practical kind of issue is that we also get caught in writing, and it sort of stalls us. You're really on a flow. Everything's going great. And then you get to something and you think, this has to work. And now you go to think about it. And now you're forward. Right. All those lovely thoughts that you had, you haven't put down on paper. They were just in your head. And I've done that so often that I get so cross with myself. So I try not to. Sometimes that's when I pick up a little pen and paper. You just scribble something down. Something's just flow sometimes. And please don't go. And that's when you use place words. They words or text that you put in your text. They just tell you what you're going to do. So I've taken a piece of writing that I was doing. So hence, while understanding violence in the community, and I'm saying, this is going to need more detail. I mean, I can't just say violence in the community because what? But I'm going to stop now because I'm on a roll. So keep going. I just say adding detail. So as to potentially contribute to the improvements in well-being of residents, essential to our study and so on. And then I say, capacity building. Find another term. capacity building is wrong. This isn't about capacity building. But that kind of tells me where I'm headed, and I'll find a better term. But I mustn't get stuck. Then keep going, and the sentence is too long. I don't know if you get into long. I'm very capable of that. Whoa! But just keep going. Keep going with your long sentence. Doesn't matter. But just put them. Mark, sentence is too long. You can come back to it. You know, the reference is needed there. The reference, because I'm talking about decolonization. I can't say that without a reference. I can't say transformation curricula without a reference. But you can see that I can then write, and I can get the message down. And actually, the writing is quite nice when you do it without having to put in the reference. You've got the references in the end of the fucking paper, of course. But if you haven't, and you have to read it from the train, then like there, I've gone for more detail right up there, I wouldn't have got this done. So start anywhere, start somewhere. Thank you. Because in the end, academic writing isn't linear. I know you like to start at the introduction and end at the conclusions, but it's not linear. And that's why I like structure. Because if you've got structure, you can start anywhere. And you know where it fits in. Right? So it's not about the way that you read it, it's actually about the way that you write. So if we look at these, that's the sort of order of your proposal. There's your structure. Introduction, literature, methodology. But how do you write? You might very well start with literature. It's often that we do. And then you go to your methodology. And actually you come back to your introduction, because in a way, your introduction is kind of a little bit of a summary of some of the literature and your methodology. And so if you start there, you often put far too much in, and you've basically written chapter 3 in chapter 1 of your thesis, or you've done all of your methodology there. So, and then you might toggle between introduction and literature. So it doesn't matter how you do it, just know that you do it. And then I have some students who are very chronological, like to start at the beginning, like to you know what? It's okay. I mean, it has to suit also our personality. So it's all okay, but don't feel. And then read. Please read a lot. What reading does is it tells you what's out there. It tells you how others are writing, and actually, if you read a lot, you write better. If you write a lot, you actually read it, because reading also has to be done with an insight. But the two go together very much. And ultimately, what they're about is thinking. Okay? I mean, that's really what we want. We want you as writers to be academic thinkers. That's your writing skill. So writing is learned by imitation. You can, if you read enough, you can imitate. This isn't copying, this isn't plagiarism. It's in your own words, but you can imitate. So William Zinser says, if anyone asks me how I learned to write, I say I learned by reading the men and women who were doing the kind of writing I wanted to do. So find those gurus, those people who write like you want to write. And that's helped me a lot in developing my sort of style is really finding people who I like to read. And then I think, well, I'd like people to read me and feel like that, you know. So then I must start writing more like that person. And some of them aren't in my field, they're in other fields, but their writing style is because it's getting that stuff from your head into the paper. I mean, that's the art of writing. Get creative if you block. I've had one student, and she would come and speak to me. think she's spotless. She knows what she's at. It's all flowing. It's lovely. She'd go away and she'd send me the draft, and I think, thank you. And it just wasn't well written and wasn't staying. And then together we realized that she's an awful person. She can speak really, really, but why isn't it on? So we recorded it. And then initially just transcribed her recordings as a start for her to write. And it unleashed her writing. From then on, she was actually great. So those kind of things. Write home if you're that creative about something. Write your methodology as a story, and I'm going to do a little bit of a story that's now. Write in your home language. It can free you up to sometimes. You can come back and if you really suck and you can say something. Don't feel it has to be English. It has to be English ultimately, but really can kind of free you up. Do a drawing. Like drawings myself. Lots of drawings, and they kind of you get the flow of the paper and the thoughts, and then once you sort of learn to do this, you can toggle between mediums. You can toggle between tables and text, and you can between drawings and so here's the creativity. It's a nice idea, and we use it quite a lot for our students as they prepare their research proposal. So you can also do it quickly. I'll give you a few minutes to do it. I think it's worth doing. So once upon a time, researchers believed that. Okay, what part of your studies there? Some of your literature. So what are the gems? So once upon a time, researchers believed that. And you just want a short sentence, not 5 pages. But then I thought that maybe there's your gap. Okay? So what I want to do is, there's your study, to discover that, which will change the way that we just all spend a few minutes and actually do that exercise. It's worth it. I hope those of you online can still hear and are able to do that, because I think it would also Right, you managed to do that. Anybody want to read their story quickly?
Once upon a time, researchers believed that economy is solely controlled by markets. But then I thought that maybe the government or the states can play a more meaningful role. So what I want to do is to find a link between the government or the states and the development of an economy, to discover that in the province of KZN, the colleges can offer skills which will change the way that the society functions.
You're really good. And did that help you to think through your study like that?
Yes, no, I've been looking at my study, but this exercise is narrowing things into perspective, yeah. So, because now I see the funnel that you spoke about in the beginning, yes, that I take things and then come to.
So, I mean, so well done. Anybody from anywhere online, please, or here? The other one want to read? Yeah?
Not particularly on my side, right? But yeah, so once upon a time, research continued that life was so confident the conclusion with the lead. But then I thought maybe it is a correlation between the number of people that contact the FBI and those that move back to source. So what I want to do is perform an experiment with how this discovery. Discover that the ingredients used in the soap actually do have antibiotic properties that could prevent the transmission of the virus. Which would include that how you use the soap to work.
Fabulous. That's lovely. That's a lovely story. Great. So, Zana, have you done yours? Okay. You can share it with me afterwards if you like. But is there anybody online? No. All right. I hope those of you that are online have tried to do it, and that it helps you unlock some of your writing, and hold on to that, because as you write, you can always come back to that, and that's your little summary. That's your little just capture. And it can even focus your reading. It can focus a lot of things. You go back to your little story. All right, so another thing, bullet points are not considered good in academic writing and scientific writing. I mean, it's not saying that you should never ever use them sparingly. Mostly they like a narrative to the text, but there are times when you can use it. But they're really good when you just want to jot things down quickly. Just points, just jot them down, because then you can expand those bullet points into you can write about each of them in a little bit more detail. And eventually you have this kind of this text, and you can get rid of the bullet. And you have what you couldn't do to start with, which is write the paragraph. But now using bullet points. So that helps a lot of people, and they find it useful. Sort of things. And Kosanati, please go ahead. Can you hear me? Kosanati, if you unmute, and please go ahead. We're not able to hear you. I don't know if you're speaking and there's something on this side, but then just perhaps put something in the chat for Dr. Parag to see. And I'd be happy to come back to it at any point. Ultimately, what we should all hope for is that we actually find some pleasure in it. That makes the whole thing easy. Of course, we're goal-oriented, and so some of that, if not pleasure, we have to get it done. I would give it some pleasure in it. And even if it's just some parts of it, I mean, even if you just find pleasure in that, that's great. Because then you strive to get to that point of you can hand it in. I do like the sensation of having finished an article. I mean, it's a lot of what drives me. And when I get that publisher's letter that kind of says your article has been accepted, I mean, it's quite a high, actually. So I'm afraid I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie when it comes to that. And so my writing is driven by the fact of that feeling. But that's okay. Gets me some publications. Yes.
Maybe a quick one. What would you say is the difference between academic writing and the writing that maybe you would send to the newspaper article? For example, maybe there might not be references there, but you will be writing. And then academic writing stresses much more on references. Is there maybe other?
It's a very good point. I think, look, writing has become less formal. So our scientific and our academic writing was very formalized, and it is becoming a little bit less formal. But you answered yourself those kind of differences where you must have it. You have to have an evidence base. You need references. You also need to fit in with the language of the context that you're writing in. And in a journal article, you're much freer to be sort of flowery and emotive, and you don't want that sort of emotive. It also has to be factual and it's much more rigidly accurate than writing. You have to trust every word. You know, journalists have a bit more freedom to make an opinion, and it's not based in their opinion, and they can write about it. Researchers can't actually write about our opinion in that same way. So yeah, they're different genres. One thing that we have to do more as academics, though, is we have to learn to write in those sort of spaces. We should be able to write in spaces that are for people. So not necessarily the newspaper, but I think of something like Conversations Africa. I don't know if you read Conversations Africa, lovely. So Conversations is a big academic journal space, which was developed in Europe, but it's making science accessible to people. So it's built on a sort of science, technology, and society philosophy. And then, but they have an academic Africa now. It was brought up sort of maybe 10, 12 years ago. And what they have journalists who take our writing, they ask us to write it, and we write it with sort of certain things, and then they turn it into a more journalistic style, which people sort of tap into, and it's really, we have to learn to write on those days. We actually do, because we want our writing to be accessible to society. Yeah. So that's one. The other places, but I think Conversations Africa is probably the biggest social access point for the people. And researchers who have published in Conversations Africa, some of them, they get like 1 million reads. And I have one colleague who got funding because of writing in Conversations Africa, and a funder came and said, you know, I want to support that research. So it's got different benefits, but the main reason that we write there is because we want our work to be accessible to everybody, and we have a sort of a social justice agenda, and we don't want research just to be sitting on the shelves of academics. So I think it's a good question to ask, because we need to be able to do that. So yes, finding some sort of pleasure, and of course the only way to get things done is to do it. So you keep going until you finish. I mean, that's good. And so the use of the first person. So was a typical in the health sciences. I think in business you've always been a little bit more emancipated sort of thing. And that's fabulous. In the health sciences, we only work in the third person. And actually, many of our journals are still third person only. But with the qualitative research coming in, first person is acceptable in certain environments, and it's going to change. So, but what I sometimes do is I'm struggling to sort of describe something, and if I write it as me, describing it to the colleague, when I write it in that way, very colloquial type, I can then turn it into academic writing, because I've got the story down, I've got the information down. But sometimes to write it in that sort of rigid style, it can be quite difficult. We're good at it, and I think third person is appropriate in some areas. So it's just that's a difference. That's another difference. But those are also differences between disciplines. So we have to fit differences between journals to fit it to suit. Right. So when you write in your own voice, also what you're trying to do is have a conversation. I tend to write and think of academic writing as an argument, as building an argument. Okay? And kind of put this side, but then that, and so this, you know, and it's sort of an argument style. But you can do it in a conversation style as well. And if that fits your voice, then you put that sort of conversation style. So how then do you get that voice in? If you have control over your topic that you're researching, and I think that's, you know, when you express yours, you have a confidence about it, and it comes across, and that is then the reader kind of says, oh, that's his, I can hear that he knows what he's doing, and that's how it works. Show the reader what you think, though. Okay? Thinking is so important to academia. So you allow it to show us what you think and what conclusions you draw based on what you've read or based on what you've researched. And present your academic position in response to the research project. Those are the ways that you get your voice. So this voice thing is not it's really fine. I think most of you write as you do, your voice will. So don't let that intimidate, because there's so much written about your voice that you get a bit worried, how am I going to do this? So establish your academic position is quite important. We tend not to do that in our sort of scientific, rigorous studies, clinical trials, the quantitative research. We tend not to put our academic position. Qualitative, we do. We tend to put our, who am I, my position. We put a positionality. And that helps with your voice. Show that it's your research project, that you know about it, and especially if you come to defend it. Do they defend proposals here or defend thesis? You do? Some. So, yeah, we do make our students defend their proposal. The thesis they may or may not depend on kind of what we are looking at from the examiner, if there's some decision to be made. And then of course, now you've not only got to write, but you've got to be able to speak it. And the sound is really somebody's understand. Now, obviously, we try and make it comfortable and because it's not either day. So, distinguish between your views and others. And that's an important thing. So tell me when this comes from literature and then what you might think or what you intend. And this isn't a kind of airy-fairy stuff, but this is directed towards it because this is why you want to do this study. And making it confident is really important to have in your voice. If you have an authentic writing style, so I don't want to change my students' writing to the point where it looks like I've written it. I mean, it must be their work. But by the same token, I can help refine some of the things and make their writing better. I have some students who are really good at reading my drafts, and they give me back what I gave them, and they really enjoy it, and they're quite ruthless, and it's really helpful. So it's a two-way stream. I mean, don't think that because I've written a lot and I've researched a lot that I write everything easily and first time and it's done. Absolutely not. I also have journal articles that get rejected and for various reasons. And then the one that happened this year, I mean, I put it into the wrong journal. And when I look, and I think, all my experience, I think of sending that particular page on that particular topic to that journal. It was a mismatch, you know, but it took a rejection for me to wake up and think. And of course, then I sat on which journal should have go to, and I sent it in, and it's not published. So there we go. That's the nature of being in academia. You have to get quite thick-skinned, and you have to cope with review, but doing that instead of the pointer. But now we are going to a little bit more informal and stylish. I have students who can be quite creative. So I had one who actually was researching a very serious topic of first date experience. And so, but he wanted to write it as a novel. And so he wrote it as a quiz. Going into that quiz. And it was so beautifully written. Now I couldn't do that. He had that ability to be able to do that. So you can do those kind of things, be creative and stylish. Most of us stick to. Remember that examiners do have some expectations, and so you're writing for the examiner, and so keep that in mind. But start to develop your skills in alternative paths. So sometimes be able to be descriptive, but be able to be analytical. Because in different places in the proposal or the thesis, you need to take on those identities. You need to be able to describe well. You need to be able to be analytical, persuasive. When it comes to the recommendations, persuasive and it was critical. And with the different genres, you know, an essay style, a report style, or reflective writing, a literature review, all of those are kind of genres. Obviously, the proposal is a genre as and then science. So when it's a conversation, you need kind of two people in a conversation. Here, you're not expecting to get the conversation back, but you enter it as if you're speaking. And so you might do this sort of thing of recalling ways that the community has already engaged with this topic. That's a conversation. So you're telling the reader, you know, this is what's been happening out there. And you imagine the reader saying, oh, that's very interesting, but what is your purpose in this? You know, and then you give the answer to that. You establish the need and the gap, and you're not boring, but you're informative and you're trustworthy. And in the end, the reader is really interested and wants to keep reading. And that's what we want. We want our examiner or reviewer to be interested in it. It's an academic writing, and I don't know if we can go to this one. Is there a, how do we, this note? I think if we click on there, yeah, just click there. I think it will take it to us. Yes, there we go. So just a bit of light relief. But it has. Thanks. So you might not think that your thesis can be quite a story, but it can be. We actually can write, like that once upon a time idea, you're writing a story of your thesis. So you're telling what the context is and what your situation is, and you can do it as a nice story. So don't forget that. That man and hole is just a fun thing. If you think of the research proposal, your outline of the problem is the man in the hole. That the problem is down there, okay? And then you want to get the man out of the hole. And that's your research plan. And then if you Pat Thompson, she writes a blog called Patter, and it comes every morning, every Monday morning. On a weekly basis, she posts, and you can get it into your inbox. And she writes about academic rights. And she has, and then all of the resources are on the site. So if you get stuck, I mean, I refer to her quite a lot, and I get stuck in revising, and I get a review back from an editor saying, you know, the introduction isn't well structured or well produced. I go to Pat Thompson and I say, how do I structure an introduction? And she says, an introduction has to have this, and this. You know? And preferably you start here and then you do this and then that advice into my introduction, and I send it back, and the editor says it's really nice. So rely on others who can advise us. And Pat Thompson is really good. And she has this ERCR or CREC, and it's about the exposition to the context. Okay? So that's all the stuff that the reader needs to know before we start the story. And you know, stories that do that, especially plays, and they give you all that sort of background, and there's the street, and there's the this, and it's sort of, you know, dark and gloomy and what. And then there's the rising action. That's the actual research. That's the exciting part. Now we all get to the end of it going, and this is a series of events. So this happened, then I did that, then this, then the next thing. And then you get to the findings and discussion, and you get the climax, that evidence and extension. And then, you know, that big, hopefully that big wow moment, which leads on to the resolution or the crunch, where everything comes together in your recommendations and conclusions. So writing a thesis as a story is possible, proposals not so, but I still want to introduce you to Pat Thompson. I think she's worth having, and it all just, you don't have to read everything she posts, but those of you that have a particular interest, let's do a little bit on editing and that, and reaching towards the end, and hopefully we can have a bit of an open session, and those that have other questions, so I don't mind staying on a little bit, and we can try and help anybody with any other questions as well. But when you write, coherence and cohesion are two things that you have to think of. Now, you don't have to remember the words, you don't even have to remember which one is coherence and which one is cohesion, but you have to do two things. You have to have a logical organization of the ideas. Okay? And that's all the way through. Because when you don't have this coherence, then you get just a paragraph there, and then the next paragraph, and there's no connection between them. And then the reader kind of just, and then you jump here, and actually it relates back to what was there. And so it's really important. And highlighting on your computer is really good. I mean, I sometimes do word search, and I highlight everywhere in the text that the student has used a particular word. Okay? And then I say, I put that all in context. And then you'll have some coherence. Of course, you can have it in the introduction, and then you can have it at the end in the conclusions when you speak into it. But within the methodology. You can't keep saying, well, the sample was this, and the insight, and this, and the sample was that, and put it all in one place. So to do that is cohesion is a bit finer grained. Cohesion is down to the level of sentences that actually connect together and give you that smooth text. And it's really important that each sentence links to the next sentence. And your thought then shows this nice flow as you build in your argument and you're taking the reader through that story and building towards something. And logic, so really, really important. So if you think of coherence, you might think of it as this big puzzle, and all the sentences in a piece of writing eventually add up, the way that all the pieces in the puzzle do. So that's the kind of coherence. So everything pulls together. If you think of cohesion, it's the one sentence to the next sentence to the next sentence to the next sentence, and then one paragraph to the next paragraph. You know, just follow it on. So how do you do this? Because I think for me this is perhaps the most important skill that I can involve with, and it will just change the quality of your writing at the level of writing. You can pay attention to coherence. So what you have to do is you, at the level of the whole text, whether it's a proposal or a thesis, as well as at the level of paragraphs and sentences, it must read as if it's continuous and connected. So you read to yourself, and you read each sentence, and you say, how did I get here? Where's the connection? Where's the link? Then do something about it. And sometimes it's a however. You know, what are those words? Or sometimes they're in wrong order. And if you switch them around, then it will be a much more natural flow. Your own work, sentence by sentence. Make sure that your ideas are logically organized into paragraphs. So for any of the sections that you write, if you've got 3 paragraphs, what is the logic of those paragraphs? Are you funneling down? Are you opening up? Are you going from the sort of big picture to the like maybe the whole institutional organization, to the actual department? How are you doing it? And just read it and see if it makes logical sense. I think getting back to structure, because I do think if you have structure, it really helps. It builds in that logic. And the person who asked right at the beginning, if those things I put on the table, if they could add structure, I really think they do. And even if you don't put them as things, those will lead you into having a paragraph for each that makes logical sense. Each phrase and sentence linked to those that come before, and keywords and concepts reinforce cohesion. So, for instance, sometimes repeating a word over and over again, and especially in one sentence or one paragraph, is generally not right. But some repetition brings in cohesion, because he keeps reminding the reader and talking about this. You know, I talked about that. And just so as you got me, so this is kind of what I'm at. You know, just so sometimes repetition. And that's why they talk about golden threads, that ultimately in your proposal, in your thesis, you can follow through all the way through, and you keep seeing that you're coming back to your study, you know, your particular little niche that you're working on. You can see that all the way through. It's in the literature review, it's in methodology, everything. Kind of, yeah, I get it. I get exactly what it means. So that means that sequencing is the key to coherence. Where you start and how you take it through and where you do. And sequencing is quite a personal choice. So I don't it's not necessarily a particular sequence, but there needs to be some sort of sequence. And those sequences apply at the level of the word, the sentence, paragraph, the section, and of course, how they. Because what you don't want from a reviewer who looks at your proposal, you're dealing with proposals now, but the same with an examiner looked at your thesis or a reviewer looked at your journal article. And this is taken from one of our reviewers' comments. The disconnection between the theoretical framework and the methodology raises further questions on the coherence of the thesis. Or in this case, it was a thesis rather than a proposal. And you don't want that. Because now your whole thesis is actually basically the examiner is saying, I don't get this because it's not coherent. And so there's disconnect between your theoretical framework and the methodology. Where do you go with that? And where do you go with that? Because you've done the study. You're busy writing it up. So you've got to look for that sort of alignment from proposals. You can't end up at the end and see that you haven't chosen a theoretical framework that fits your method or methodology that fits your theoretical framework. You haven't selected a methodology that answers your research question. So, and it happens. And those are the places where the thesis goes back or the proposal goes back for major revision, because you can't do anything to it without major revision. So coherence is about that logic and that consistency. The proposal lost coherence, and when you talk in separate directions, that's an easy thing to do. You know exactly what you're going to do, and you start, and then what happens if you end up getting scattered all over the place, and you're doing too much, and you actually don't know where you go. So it's about moving that thing. So to improve coherence, one of the things is how much space is given to different ideas. If what you're writing about is important, it needs to get more space in your proposal or your thesis than something that's unimportant. And that is a big point. When I see a proposal and there's a whole lot on statistical analysis, and then the person says, and I'm going to do interviews. And I go, what? No. And they say, hold on to statistical analysis, a little bit saying, you can also do qualitative research. Okay? Yeah, but I'm assuming their studies going to be quantitative research. Whole space to it. And then they're actually going to do interviews. Now that disconnect, it's all it is a size. All you have to do is shrink a little bit on quantitative, expand what you're going to do, and then say interviews. And then the reader's happy suddenly. So that's a big thing. And letting go of some stuff that you've read, some stuff that you've written, some you just have to, it doesn't belong there. You can't just fit it all in. When we write our thesis, there are papers that aren't part of our thesis, but you can go back to your data and you can write about them. They don't all belong in your thesis. Don't try and put it in. So that space, look at that you've given space to the important ideas. If too much detail is given on something unimportant, it's time to step back. Are the assumptions needing to be spelled out, or are some crucial sections that should be firmed up with more words? Okay, so look at that. Look at the sort of things. Consider the reader and think, are there any points that need more explanation as to how things interconnect? Think of the reader and sort of guide the reader through, and there's something which you read their papers and they sort of say, and they even go as far as to sort of say, and you might be wondering why this and why this. They kind of anticipate what the reader might. You think, but they just know. And so those kind of cues can be but of course within the style. And sometimes metaphors, metaphors, analogies, metaphors, stories can help. So then cohesion, it's that glue, because this is now sentence by sentence. So it's each of those, and it's actually the little bits in between that hold the sentences together. So this is about flow of the writing. And your text has cohesion when the words and ideas flow together and they're easy to follow, they're easy to read. Each point in your text relates either directly to the past, to the last part, or the previous point, and back to the main idea of that. So just read each sentence. And I'm all the time asking, how do you get it? Talking about something and suddenly talking about something else. And it's not wrong to do that, to just put a little bit of something in there, which says, perhaps, and an alternative view is, or there's also the topic of, and you can go into this other topic, but don't make the reader bounce from there and think, what? The strategy is to achieve cohesion, so that's where some repetition can come in, reference words can come in, transition signals, those that, the howevers, the therefores, the in addition, but use the right one. You can't say however, and there's no however from the previous sentence. And therefore, no therefore, there's no the right transition signal. And then synonyms often. And so the sort of way, the sort of things that you do, initially, eventually, however, led to difficulty in that, the problem was solved by that, and the weakness was overcome by. That's sort of, that's a bit exaggerated. You might not have a paragraph with all of those connecting words in, but you look at it sentence by sentence and you see, does it actually make sense? And so I've got some cohesive devices there, which I also don't, in the interest of time, need to go through all of them. But you may well, you can certainly look at them and see for yourselves. I'm just having a look at how many slides and thinking out whether I push you to the limit and actually go through them. And yeah, I think I've got so few that we're going to finish easily. And so these cohesive devices, you add. So when you're adding something, and as well as moreover, furthermore, the nice one, in addition, but then they've got to be additional to what you said before. If you sequence, then it's that first, and then this, if you illustrate, then you're saying, for example, such as, so there's just a whole lot of words which help you, and they're a bit of a variety, so that you don't get too boring also, and always use therefore, and always use and. Comparing, similarly to that, this author said this, likewise, qualify the buts and the howevers and the unlesses, so are useful, and then contrasting. This author said this, whereas this one, or alternatively, or contrary to that. So that's just a list of useful words for you that I hope might help you. And then to end on focusing your right. Think about what's the point, and that's why that little once upon a time story is a good story, because what is the point that you want to make? Often what happens is we know how the argument ends. We know where we sort of go, but we don't build it to get there. And that's, so what's the point and what's the take-home message? Who's your reader? Very important to think of an examiner, actually, and or a reviewer for your proposal. Think of them and think of what they might be interested in and what are they looking for. I'm looking for the debates in your area. I'm looking for the fact that you really want to now contain it to a focus study. Can you say this? And on what basis? Evidence, evidence, evidence. Lots of things I read without references. You can't make those statements and not reference. They either don't belong there because they're your opinion, and that might come when your research data, you might find that. That's fine, that's different. But before you've got data in your proposal, you can't make a whole lot of statements unless you've got evidence. So evidence, evidence, evidence. What's new? We always want to know what's new. That's what we look for in proposals. We look for how you've got, especially with your Ds. Those of you on the DBAs, we're looking for new knowledge. We're looking for something new. And we need to see that. So it's a throw it in our face. Yeah, this is what it is. And then who cares? It's an important question because what contribution are you making? Will it matter to policy within sort of government structures, or will it be at the level of importance for a particular organization? And it's fine at all of those levels, but no, who cares? And sometimes talking these things aloud can be quite helpful to your writing. So they're also just ways of, and something that was told to me is that you have to be able to explain your research to your grandmother, your mother, and then you know what you do. For her to understand, and then you know what you do. And it's important. Because if we can't, if mom says, what are you researching? You say, oh no, you just wouldn't get it. It means I haven't got it because I can't actually explain it in language. And mom's not stupid. Mom just doesn't work in my area. And of course, some of the students, I wouldn't get the area that they work in. But I expect that they can explain it to me in a way that I could understand. And so on that note, end. And I say thank you, but I'm happy for questions and whatever the questions are if they have. Thank you.
Yes, no. Thank you very much for that. And I just had maybe a concern with the articles that we're trying to read online, only to find that they are not accessible because of whatever conditions that they put in there. To say sometimes you are so eager to find this and then you end up looking for alternative because now you can't access it.
That is such a frustration. And we kind of sit between the journals that make it open source, but then the researchers themselves are paying huge amounts to publish there. And then if they're free journals, then they have only those who subscribe. So you can often get abstracts, but not. But do you have a system through your library that will get into library?
So yes, our library does allow that. Right. However, I'm not sure whether you think that there are certain websites where you can copy and paste the link from the actual paper into
Yeah. Many ways to skin a cat.
So good question, and certainly kind of old interlibrary below that used to send hard copy articles around the world, but now they get that. Because most journals are happy for us to have access for academic reasons. And I think you can even use them in a class if you don't sort of give it to more than 9 students or whatever. With the IP, there's rules around it. So find your way, because I agree, it is very frustrating when you're sitting at home and you're searching and you kind of can't connect. Got some wisdom here. Great. Let's start with Martin, and then we'll go down. I see all the hands, but Martin, go ahead.
Thanks, Prof. And thanks for the wonderful lecture. And good evening good afternoon to my colleagues. Prof, my question was around the issue of subjectivity and objectivity, which we see more in when you reading some things, you see there's a lot of bias, or you can also write in and become biased. How do you guard against that being biased? Because at times you'll want to prove a certain point or drive a certain point home, and yet the point is neither here nor there.
So first, let me say that in the sort of original scientific thinking, there was an aspiration of being objective. And some people still strongly believe that, that experimentation and scientific design is objective. I'm less convinced, I have to say, because I think there's subjectivity in all research because we design it as a person. We make choices of where we're going to collect our data, how we're going to collect it. So you're quite right. I mean, there is that subjectivity, but you have to control it. Now, bias and subjectivity are not the same thing. So subjectivity says I make some choices as a person, and bias says that I will not. I'm going to have a leaning towards one answer, and I'm actually going to ignore data that shows me something different. I'm going to be biased towards something. And so bias is something that we have to look at. I mean, we have to be open to what the data is telling us. We have to be able to, even if it's kind of subjective to a certain degree, because we've designed it because it's opinions, it's perspectives, it is subjective, but cannot be biased. I can't just ignore some because it doesn't answer what I want. So agree. So that's what you've got to do. You know, some people write about let the data speak. And that's the answer. Your data has to tell you what you found, not what you want to see there. And I think they will be okay. And Kusanati?
Thank you. Are you able to hear me, colleagues?
We are, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Doc. I just wanted to say thanks for the session. It really showed the importance of the reciprocal relationship between reading and writing. And also, I think the course would be useful for also students involved in creative writing, journalism students, and people who do report writing. I wanted to ask, would you suggest that, you know, when you mentioned analytical, persuasive, critical, and descriptive, could we combine those in one study? And in the last, under focusing your writing, would you also suggest to include a section on how one is going to prove the argument one is making, i.e. by unpacking one's research method? But otherwise, thank you very much. And the day as well was ideal because things tend to be slower on a Saturday morning. I think if we can have another one maybe down the line on stats and research methods, but the day is definitely a very good day, a Saturday morning to do such a session. So it was informative. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kusanati. That's great feedback that you give. So your first question, yes, definitely. All of those styles, I mean, persuasive comes often at the end where you're doing recommendations and your conclusions. You pick up a more persuasive style. The analytical belongs when you're reporting your findings and your results, and you're taking on a sort of an analytical position, and you're trying to then to not be subjective and to avoid bias and be much more analytical then. So absolutely, yes. I think in different places in a thesis or a proposal, you can certainly merge those. As writers, we have a tendency sometimes towards one or other style, but all can be wrong, that's for sure. And then, just remind me of the second question.
Can you hear me, Doc?
Yes, got you.
So the under-focusing your writing, it was answered. What's the point would be the why one is doing the study. It covered what, who, and then I was asking, could we maybe have a how in terms of the research method one would adopt in supporting.
I like that addition. I like the way you're thinking, and I like that addition. And certainly in a proposal, that kind of concept of how I'm going to do this is actually really important. And defending the how I'm going to do it, because others have done it this way, or because it makes sense, because of the question I'm asking and the area I'm working in, this would sort of answer the question. Absolutely, for sure. Put the how.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. Thank you.
Andres, please go ahead. And Reason, if you're there, please unmute and go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, Doc. Yes, Doc. Sorry, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes, so Doc, my question is on literature review. Two questions. The first one is, how do you critique the literature review, say when you're doing thematic analysis? Do you do it after concluding each and every theme, or you can just do a small section towards the end of your literature review just to critique it? That's the first question. And then the other one.
After that one, go question by question. So then think of, I mean, in a way, it seems to me that we're confusing two things here, because your thematic analysis belongs to your data analysis rather than to your literature review, or unless you're using literature as your research method and you're doing a systematic and you're doing an analysis, thematic analysis there. So, and do you unpack it sort of theme by theme, or and look for literature theme by theme? I think that makes sense. Sometimes we have some other ways of doing it more in a more sort of integrated way, but I quite like the idea. If you have a thematic analysis of your data that we're talking about it, and then you're discussing your data, and you've got these things, done the coding, you've done the categorization, down to kind of 4 themes that you've got, and you want to now discuss them. Absolutely, you then for each of those themes draw on relevant literature. Yeah. Does that help? Because there might have been a nuance in that question that I missed.
Well, I'm talking in terms of, like, remember, like when you're doing a literature review, like there's different types of literature review. So let's say if I've adapted themes. So if I'm adapting themes in my literature review. So now I come to a critique, now I need to critique that part of my literature review. Do I do it during my description of the themes, or I can do it towards the end? I can just take everything as an aggregate and then I just give them like my critique at the end.
So you can choose either way, but I must say you're going to have to be clear on what type of literature review you want to do. Because, I mean, if you're doing a systematic literature review, it has to be a really systematic, and then, I mean, we follow a PRISMA method of if you're going systematic, but there are others, and that's a popular one in the sort of health arena. But quite often what we do is more comprehensive. So we're not systematic. We're not looking for everything that was ever written about it anywhere. We're being comprehensive, and we're getting as much as we can to make sense of it. And then you talk about the critiquing. When you're doing a literature review which involves critique, then it's a critical literature review. Because only in a critical literature review do you speak back to literature. Then you're doing critical literature. So first settle on which type of literature review you're doing, and then for sure you can absolutely, you can critique, you can speak back to literature. I would then try to think that, that you're doing a critical review, and then you should look at what a critical review is and see if it works. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine. So the second question is like, time and again, I always hear about critiquing research methodology in a literature review. Could you please just maybe try to like explain or simplify that for me? Because I can't quite understand when research methodology is coming in a literature review.
So some disciplines put the methodologies into the literature review. They want your theoretical framework and your cognitive framework in the literature review. Some of us don't. Some of us want it in another section in the methodology. And not there. When they talk about critiquing methodology, I think that doesn't belong so much in the literature review. Because I think that's, if you've used the methodology and you're going to build knowledge on the methodology, I would put that later, and it's not part of a proposal. I mean, maybe in your thesis. And in many ways, few of us actually go to the point of critiquing methodology. I have at times, certainly, and you might. But it's not an expected part of a thesis. An expected thing in a thesis is that you use a methodology, it's appropriate to your study, and you have your findings, and your central focus is your findings and your discussion of it, rather than critiquing the methodology and saying, actually, the methodology needs to change, and the methodology, because in a way, that's a different study, that's different research when you're doing the critique of methodology. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
That's a pleasure. And now we've still got Andres. We'll still try Andres again. Are you there? Okay. And then Lisa, you've got your hand up. Is that a legacy hand, or you've got another question? Okay. I think then, if there are other questions from here? Maybe one. Oh, and Kosanati?
Thank you, Doc. I just wanted to say, as far as I know, Richard, and I'll be corrected by any colleague, the institution is very structured in terms of how one would compile the proposal or the thesis in terms of introduction, literature review, research methods, which would include the discussion on validity and reliability. Number 4 then being data analysis, your findings, your recommendation and conclusions. So there is a guideline, and maybe that could be availed by one of the colleagues from Regent. Thank you very much. Just in terms of the question that was asked earlier.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. And absolutely, you have to sort of follow what's available at your institution where you're registered, and that's Regent. So yes, those can be made available certainly. And then I see here there's a question: is it possible to get a topic approval later of introduction from RBS? Some organizations ask for that. I'm sure that's a possibility. So the answer would be yes there. I imagine that you would need to put that in writing and be specific about what you're wanting and which organization, and you could certainly, for that Philip's question, you could certainly do so.
And there was just one more methodology question.
That's fine. Let's go for that now. This one down. Yeah. So you asked a good question there. You wanting qualitative data, which is for text data. It's in fact it's a qualitative approach, but the data is in text versus numeric data. And absolutely, there are various ways to collect it. So yes, you can do face-to-face interviews, and those can be focus group or individual. And you can also do observational studies and collect qualitative data. Certainly you can do online interviews, and yes, there are, if you structure a questionnaire, you can certainly collect qualitative data. It's how you then ask the questions, and you're quite right, you give them more time. So that there are various ways. I mean, there are many more ways than that. And some of the ways that I've used is journaling. So I ask my participants to journal. I also do photo voice. And so in qualitative research, there are many, and absolutely you may use a questionnaire. Yes.
Just to end in the chat, it was very appreciative of your time and teaching this morning class.
Well, thank you, everybody.
We found it very informative, and looking forward to the continuation.
Well, it's been lovely being with all of you. Thank you for staying the course, and I've had great group here attending face to face, and it's been a really great group online. So thank you so much for making time for this, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye. I will keep your posted with the
was held out, which I was a bit worried about, but
thank you.
Thank you.